The janitor's cart squeaked as it rolled across the polished marble floors of the hospital. Daniel pushed it quietly, eyes tired but gentle, his uniform faded from years of wear. He had been working back-to-back shifts just to keep up with rent and his daughter's medical bills. At 40, Daniel looked older than his age, his back slightly bent, his hands roughened by endless scrubbing and lifting. Yet, despite his exhaustion, there was always a softness in his face when he thought of his little girl, Emily. Emily was 7 years old, a bundle of joy and imagination despite the asthma that often left her weak. Daniel never let her see how hard life was. She thought their tiny apartment was cozy, and she believed his simple dinners of rice and beans were special recipes. He worked himself to the bone, but to Emily, he was a hero. That evening, the hospital lobby was unusually crowded. A group of suited executives and nurses whispered near the main desk. Someone important was in the building. Daniel didn't care, he had no time to follow hospital gossip. His mind was on Emily. He had promised to get home in time to read her favorite fairy tale. But just as he was about to wheel his cart into the elevator, he heard a scream. A child's scream, high-pitched, panicked, echoing through the hall. Daniel turned, heart pounding. At the far end of the corridor, a little girl, no older than Emily, was on the floor, shaking, clutching her chest. People gathered, unsure what to do. Some reached for their phones. Some called for a nurse. The child's sobs cut through the air, wild and terrified. Daniel didn't hesitate. He abandoned his cart and rushed forward, kneeling beside the girl. He recognized the look in her eyes, the same one Emily had when an asthma attack overwhelmed her. But this girl didn't have an inhaler in sight. "Sweetheart, breathe with me," Daniel said softly, trying to keep his voice calm, steady. She clung to his sleeve, trembling. Her face was red, wet with tears. The crowd whispered. Some were surprised the janitor was stepping in. Others just watched. But Daniel wasn't thinking of them, he was thinking of Emily. He reached into his pocket. A small plastic bottle rattled there. It was Emily's bubble bottle. She loved blowing bubbles before bed. It calmed her, made her giggle even on her worst nights. Daniel always carried it, in case she needed a distraction during difficult moments. He pulled it out now, twisted the cap, dipped the wand, and blew gently. The first bubble floated, catching the light from the hospital ceiling. Then another. Then a stream of shimmering spheres drifted around the girl, reflecting tiny rainbows. Her sobs hiccuped into silence. Wide-eyed, she followed the bubbles, reaching out weakly to pop one. "See. Nice and slow," Daniel whispered. "Blow like this bubble. Soft. Gentle. You can do it." The girl mirrored him, breathing slower, her chest rising with steadier rhythm. The panic began to fade from her face, replaced by wonder. Soon, the crisis was passing. The crowd exhaled in relief. A nurse ran up to check on the girl, but by then, the worst was over. Daniel smiled softly, handed the bubble wand to her trembling hands, and whispered, "You're safe now." That's when he noticed her mother. A tall woman stood just beyond the crowd, frozen. Her designer coat shimmered under the fluorescent lights, her heels silent on the polished floor. She was striking, yet her expression was not the cold one of a wealthy woman used to boardrooms and power. No, this was different. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She had watched the entire thing. The girl spotted her and cried out, "Mommy." The woman rushed forward, dropping to her knees, hugging her daughter fiercely. She kissed her hair, whispered reassurances, but all the while her gaze flicked to Daniel, this tired janitor in a faded uniform, still kneeling on the floor with his bubble wand. When the girl was taken to a room for observation, the mother remained. She approached Daniel slowly, almost cautiously, as though afraid to break something fragile. "Those bubbles," she said softly. "You saved her." Daniel shrugged, wiping his hands nervously on his uniform. "Just something I do for my daughter. Helps her breathe when she panics." The woman tilted her head, studying him. "You have a daughter?" "Yes," Daniel replied, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and weariness. 7 years old. Emily. She's my whole world. For a moment, the woman said nothing. Her eyes glistened as if she were remembering something, or someone. Finally, she whispered, "I'm Rebecca. And, I owe you more than you know." Daniel nodded politely, ready to slip away. He wasn't looking for thanks. He wasn't looking for anything at all. He just wanted to get back to Emily. But Rebecca wasn't done. The next morning, when Daniel arrived at work, whispers followed him. Nurses glanced at him curiously. Administrators who had never noticed him suddenly stopped to nod. Daniel was confused, until his supervisor called him into the office. Inside sat Rebecca, the billionaire CEO whose company funded half the hospital. She looked nothing like the icy tycoon the tabloids described. Instead, she looked almost vulnerable. She stood when Daniel entered. "I've been waiting for you," she said. Daniel frowned. "Ma'am, I don't want any trouble. I was just doing what anyone would." "No," Rebecca interrupted gently. "Not anyone. Most people froze. You stepped in. You comforted my child when she needed it most. Do you know what that means to me?" To her. Daniel shifted uneasily, unused to attention. "It was nothing." Rebecca shook her head. "It was everything. And I want to know about you. About your daughter. About why a man who carries bubbles in his pocket is working nights cleaning floors instead of changing lives." And so, for the first time in years, Daniel told his story. About losing his wife young. About raising Emily alone. About working endless shifts just to keep her fed and cared for. His voice cracked when he spoke of her asthma, the inhalers he sometimes struggled to afford. Rebecca listened without a word. And when he finished, she leaned forward, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave my daughter her breath back last night," she said. "Now let me give yours back." Within weeks, Daniel's life changed. Rebecca arranged for Emily's medical care to be fully covered. She set up a scholarship for her future. She offered Daniel a position, not as a janitor, but as a mentor for a new community outreach program the hospital was launching. A job where his kindness, his humanity, would touch countless others. And through it all, a bond formed, not of wealth and poverty, but of two parents who had known love, loss, and the fierce devotion to a child. Daniel never imagined that a simple bottle of bubbles could open such doors. But it wasn't really the bubbles, it was the heart behind them. As he tucked Emily in one night, she looked at him sleepily and whispered, "Daddy, you're a hero." Daniel smiled through tears. "No, sweetheart, I'm just a man who loves you." And somewhere across town, Rebecca sat beside her daughter's bed, thinking the very same thing. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness, a janitor blowing bubbles, can change lives in ways no one ever expects.